What if the simple act of giving water to a stranger could decide whether you lived or died the next morning? Corbin Thorne had no way of knowing that when he lifted the ladle that hot afternoon, he wasn't just quenching thirst. He was changing his future. The sun burned the earth dry between the canyon ridges and the empty scrubland. Dust drifted across the valley the way some places had morning fog. Corbin was walking toward his well, thinking about the loose gate hinge he planned to fix, when he saw her collapsed against his fence. She looked like she didn't belong on this land, or maybe the land was trying to reject her. A young woman, but tall enough that even slumped on the ground, she looked like she was folded in half. Her long, dark hair clung to her face. Dirt and dried blood streaked her temples. Her clothes were deerskin and beadwork, marking her as Apache. Her lips were cracked white. Her breathing was thin. Corbin didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He just dipped his ladle into the well and knelt beside her. Her eyes snapped open, sharp, suspicious, ready to fight, even with no strength left. But when he lifted the ladle, she stared at it as if unsure it was real. She drank once, then twice, then a third time, each swallow slower than the last. When she finished, she pushed herself to her feet with surprising strength. Standing fully upright, she towered over him. The wind moved her hair, showing the strange calm in her eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't thank him. She didn't warn him. She simply memorized him with her gaze, turned, and walked into the hills. Corbin watched her disappear into the heat shimmer of the afternoon. He told himself that was the end of it, just a thirsty traveler, nothing more. He was wrong. As evening settled, the ranch fell quiet, except for the restless horses. Corbin tried to focus on his chores. He checked the fence line, wiped dust from the saddles, and tightened the loose hinge on the gate. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the girl. The way she'd looked at him. The way she'd left without a single word. He knew Apache passed through these lands, but he'd never seen one this close to death, and never one built like a mountain. That night, he lay on his narrow cot in the cabin, staring at the ceiling beams. The horses kicked at the corral boards. The bay gelding let out a sharp cry in the dark. Corbin sat up, listening. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No rustling brush. Just the wind and a distant animal calling somewhere in the hills. He forced himself to lie back down. Everything would return to normal in the morning. That's what he told himself. But when sunrise touched the valley with pale light, he knew something was wrong. He stepped outside, pulling his suspenders over his shoulders, squinting into the brightening sky. The land stretched wide around him, dry grass and thin trails between rocks. Then he saw movement on the ridge to the north. At first he thought it was shadows, but shadows didn't sit on horseback. Shadows didn't hold spears and rifles. Shadows didn't watch a man with absolute stillness. Corbin's stomach dropped as he counted 10 riders. Then 20. Then more on the hills to the east, more by the dry creek bed to the west. Apache warriors. Dozens. Then hundreds. 3 ridges filled with them, a ring closing around his land like a tightening rope. The horses in the corral pressed against the far fence, nostrils flaring. They could feel it. Danger thick in the air. Corbin reached for the rifle, leaning by the door, but stopped himself halfway. 1 rifle against 300 Apache was pointless. He stepped into his yard with his hands empty. His throat felt tight, but he forced calm into his steps. The warriors didn't move, didn't shout, didn't threaten. They just watched him from every direction, silent and controlled. This wasn't a raid. Raiders struck fast and vanished. This was deliberate. This was a message. But what message? His thoughts snapped toward the girl, the water he'd given her, the way she'd stared at him before walking away. Then, a single rider broke from the warriors on the northern ridge. He descended slowly down the slope, his horse careful over the rocks. The man was older, his face lined with years of sun and battle. He carried no war paint, but his presence alone showed command. He held himself like someone used to being obeyed. Corbin didn't move as the warrior stopped 50 feet away. Behind the old rider, another line of men appeared. watching, waiting. The chief lifted one hand. Not in greeting, not in threat, just raised it and held it steady, as if waiting for a signal. Corbin's heart pounded. If they wanted him dead, he'd already be on the ground. This wasn't execution. This was judgment. The chief lowered his hand and dismounted with deliberate calm. He stepped forward 10 paces and stopped. Corbin forced himself to match the distance. 10 paces forward, 50 feet apart. The air felt tight around them. The chief's eyes were dark, unreadable, measuring. Then he lifted his hand again, but this time he pointed directly at Corbin's well. Understanding hit Corbin like a hammer. The girl. The water. The hand lowered, replaced by a new gesture. A motion like pouring and drinking. Corbin nodded once. Yes, he'd given her water. Yes, he'd helped her. Movement rippled across the ridge as the warriors parted, creating a gap. Through that opening, a single rider appeared. The girl. Clean, braided hair decorated with beads. Dressed in fresh deerskin, sitting tall on a painted horse. She rode down alone, stopping 10 feet from him. Her gaze was just as sharp, just as unreadable as before. She spoke first. "You give water." "Not a question, a fact." Corbin swallowed. "Yes." She studied him, then said, "You not know who I am." "No," he answered. "You were hurt. You needed help." The faintest flicker of surprise crossed her face. Then she turned to the chief and spoke in Apache. He answered with one word. She faced Corbin again. "My father say you brave or fool." Corbin's blood turned to ice. Father. The chief was her father, which meant she wasn't just Apache. She was the daughter of the leader of the 300 warriors surrounding him, and whatever came next would decide whether he walked back into his cabin, or whether this valley became his grave. Corbin felt the weight of every warrior watching him. The valley was silent except for the soft breath of the painted horse beneath the girl. She stood tall in the saddle, her shadow stretching long across the dirt. Her face was calm, but her eyes stayed fixed on Corbin, studying him again the way she had yesterday. "My father say I do test," she said. Her voice was steady now. "Walk alone 3 days. No food, no water. I fall, hit head, lose path. Your water save life." Corbin glanced at the chief. The old man didn't look grateful. He didn't look angry either. He simply watched, as if Corbin were a stone he was deciding whether to keep or throw. "I'm glad you're all right," Corbin said. The girl tilted her head, almost confused by the words. "You, not afraid." "I'm terrified," Corbin said honestly, "but running or shooting won't save me, so I'm standing." For the first time, the smallest hint of something softened in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or understanding. She spoke to the chief again. The chief nodded once, slow, deliberate. Then he stepped back toward his horse. The girl faced Corbin. "We watch you now. See if you speak truth. See if you tell white men where we are. See if you good man or bad." "How long?" Corbin asked. She didn't answer. She simply mounted her horse in one smooth motion and rode back up the ridge. The warriors shifted like a wave, falling into place behind her. Corbin watched them return to the hills. They didn't leave. They settled in like hawks waiting on tall rocks, watching every move he made. The next 6 days crawled. Every morning, warriors stood on the ridges. Every night, fires flickered in the distance. Corbin fed his horses under their eyes. He fixed fences under their eyes. He slept lightly, waking at every sound. On the 4th morning, he found a bundle at his door. Dried meat, a small jar of water, a silent message, "Stay alive." He ate it because he didn't have much choice. On the 6th day, the girl returned. She rode alone into the valley, stopping 10 feet from him just like before. Her eyes scanned the ranch, the sky, the ridges. "You still here?" she said. Corbin shrugged. "Not many places to go unless I want arrows in my back." "You smart," she said. Her tone was neutral, but her words carried weight. She walked to the well and looked down into it. Deep water, good water. That's why I built here. My people need water too, she said. White men fence land, dig wells, say this is mine, that is yours. But this land once ours. Corbin felt the truth of that press against him. He didn't argue. I don't want trouble, he said. Trouble here anyway, she replied. Question is, what you do when it come? Before Corbin could answer, a gunshot cracked the air. Then another. Then 3 more. The girl's head jerked toward the sound. The warriors on the ridges shifted, alarm rippling through their ranks. Voices echoed from somewhere beyond the eastern hills, men shouting, horses moving fast. She spun toward Corbin. White men come, many with guns. How many? Corbin asked. 20, maybe more. Corbin felt cold settle in his chest. Are they hunting you? Yes. They hunt us, she said. Then she met his eyes. And if they see you with us, they hunt you too. Before he could speak, she swung onto her horse. Then she pointed at him. You stay alive. Stay still. Say nothing stupid. She rode hard back to the ridges. The warriors were already melting into the hills in a wave of controlled motion. Within moments, they were gone from the valley floor, but Corbin knew they weren't far. They were watching, hidden. Then he heard the militia. They came charging over the ridge like thunder. 15 riders first, more behind, dust rising around them like smoke. The lead rider was broad and bearded. His eyes were sharp and suspicious. You alone here? He shouted. Corbin nodded. Just me. You seen Apache? Another man yelled. A younger rider. Angry eyes. Rifle already up. Corbin chose every word carefully. Saw signs, but they're gone now. Gone where? The bearded man demanded. North, Corbin guessed. The men dismounted. They searched the yard, the corral, the cabin. They found tracks. Dozens. Fresh. The young rider swung his rifle toward Corbin. You lied. They were here. Quote. Corbin didn't flinch. They didn't attack me. Why not? The bearded man asked. You're a white settler on Apache land. Corbin felt his heart beat hard. Maybe because I didn't give them a reason. You hiding something? The young rider snapped. No, Corbin said. Just trying to stay alive. The militia leader stepped closer. You're going to tell us exactly where they went. Corbin looked toward the western ridge. He knew the Apache were watching from the rocks. Listening. He swallowed and made his decision. I'm not telling you anything that leads to a war you can't win, Corbin said. Not with 300 warriors out there. The men froze. 300? One whispered. The young rider paled. The bearded man's hand drifted to his revolver. You expect us to believe that? Before Corbin could answer, a sound echoed through the valley. A call. Not human, not animal. A warning. Then another call answered it from the opposite ridge. Then another. The men panicked as the calls moved closer, closing in from all sides. They're still here, one rider whispered. Mount up, the bearded leader roared. The militia scrambled onto their horses. They fled the valley the way they had come, riding hard, dust flying behind them. Corbin stood alone again in the silent yard. The calls stopped. Warriors began to appear on the ridges one by one. Then the girl. Then her father. Then the others behind them. Calm, controlled, victorious without firing a shot. The girl rode toward him. You not tell them, she said. No. You could. They kill us. They kill you. You still not tell. I don't want anyone dead, Corbin said. She studied him a long moment. Then she turned to her father and spoke. The chief listened, nodded, then stepped forward with a calm authority that filled the valley. He pointed at Corbin. My father say. The girl translated. The test is over. Corbin let out a slow breath. You pass. Corbin didn't move at first. The words settled over him like warm sunlight after a long storm. He had passed. Whatever judgment the Apache had held over him for 6 long days was finally lifted. The chief stepped closer. His presence was steady and powerful, like an old tree rooted deep in the ground. He unwrapped something from a small leather pouch and placed it on the table inside Corbin's cabin. A necklace. Blue and white beads woven in a pattern Corbin had never seen. The girl stood beside him. "This means protection," she said. "My people see this. They know you, friend. They will not harm you." Corbin stared at the beadwork. "Why me?" "Because you give water when no one watching," she said. "You give without asking who I am, without wanting anything back. That show honor." The chief nodded as she spoke. His expression didn't change, but Corbin felt something shift in the room. Respect. Acceptance. Corbin picked up the necklace. It felt heavier than it looked. "If I wear this," he said quietly, "white men will call me a traitor." "Maybe," she said, "but my people will keep you alive. Sometimes honor make enemies, sometimes it make family." Corbin breathed out slowly, then he slipped the necklace over his head. The chief touched Corbin's shoulder once. Then he left the cabin, mounting his horse with the grace of a man who had lived his whole life in the saddle. The warriors followed. They rode out from the valley, moving like a river of horses and determination. Only the girl stayed a moment longer. "My name is Nahona," she said. "It means beautiful." Corbin smiled faintly. "It suits you." She held his gaze, calm and direct. "Maybe we meet again." Then she turned and rode after her people, disappearing into the hills with the setting sun behind her. The valley settled into silence. For 3 weeks, that silence held. Corbin worked the land, fixed his fences, fed his horses, and wore the necklace openly. He didn't hide what he'd chosen. His life felt different now, shaped by something larger than his small cabin or his quiet ranch. But trouble always found its way to a man trying to live in peace. Late one morning, dust rose on the southern trail. Corbin stepped outside and saw 8 riders coming fast. The bearded militia leader was at the front. The young, hot-headed rider was beside him. They stopped in a half-circle around the yard, rifles resting across saddles. "We heard rumors," the bearded man called out. "Heard you've been dealing with the Apache." Corbin didn't reach for any weapon. He just stood there, calm. "I haven't dealt with anyone. I've survived." "Is that so?" the young rider barked. "Because that necklace says otherwise." They had seen it. Corbin didn't hide it. "It's a symbol of peace," Corbin said. "It's a symbol of betrayal." The young rider spat. The bearded man dismounted. He walked toward Corbin slowly, eyes sharp. "We lost families to Apache raids. Homes burned, people dead, and here you are wearing their colors." Corbin held his ground. "I gave water to someone dying, that's all." "Is that what they told you?" the young man snapped. "That's how they trick good men, make them think they're different." Corbin shook his head. "You weren't there. You didn't see what I saw. 300 warriors surrounded me for days, not one shot fired, not one threat made. They watched, they tested me, and when you came riding in ready to spill blood, they held their ground." The bearded man's jaw tightened. "You're playing a dangerous game, Thorne." "I'm playing the only game that keeps people alive," Corbin said. "Peace." The militiamen shifted uneasily. Even they felt the weight of the truth. The young rider pointed his rifle. "You made your choice," he said. "You chose them." Corbin didn't blink. "I chose not to kill, not to lie, not to bring war to a valley that doesn't need it." The bearded man raised a hand, stopping the younger rider from shooting. He looked long at Corbin, searching his face for something. Finally, he sighed. "Mount up," he said to his men. "He ain't our problem." The young rider glared. "You're letting him go just like that?" "He's not hurting anyone," the leader replied, "and I'm not starting a fight we can't finish." The militia turned their horses and rode off, this time slower, less angry, less sure of themselves. When their dust faded from the valley, Corbin stood alone again. The morning sun warmed the beadwork against his chest. He breathed out slowly, grateful and tired. Then he saw movement on the ridge. A lone rider, tall, straight. Nahona. She watched him for a long moment. When he lifted a hand, she lifted one back, a quiet signal from one soul to another, a sign of peace, a sign that he had chosen right. Months later, stories began spreading far beyond the valley. Stories of an Apache chief who spared a white rancher. Stories of a giant warrior girl who had survived her test because of a stranger's kindness. Stories of a man who stood in the middle of his yard while 300 warriors decided whether he lived or died. Some said it was luck. Some said it was courage. Some said it was foolishness. But Corbin knew the truth. It all began with a ladle of water. A simple choice. A human choice. And sometimes, simple choices echoed farther than gunshots ever could. He kept the necklace. He kept the peace. And when thirsty travelers passed through that harsh valley, Apache or white, friend or stranger, he did the same thing he'd done on that hot afternoon. He offered water and let the world decide the rest.